Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jonathan Fur Awasum. Good evening to all of you. I am the Executive President of Compassion Peace Initiative Coalition COPIC, and I wanted to reach out to all of you to appeal to the conscience, of viewers, citizens of the world. If you are a concerned human being, I wanted to bring to your attention the severe humanitarian crisis that is plaguing, the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon in West Africa. This crisis, began in 2016 and is escalated into an arms conflict that has taken a huge toll, on the populations of the people of the English-speaking region of Cameroon. Cameroon is a former British, German, and French colonies, and the two English-speaking part are the minority population of the entire, Cameroon territory that is made up of 10 regions. So, northwest and southwest is two of the eight of the other eight, regions that make up the 10 regions of the country. We have historical problems dating back as far back as the 1950s, prior to the clamor of independence by many African countries. As you all can understand the history of colonization, and Cameroon, had their unfair share of independence in 1960 and 1961. That is both the French-speaking part of Cameroon had independence in 1960, and the English-speaking part of Cameroon had their own independence in 1961. But these two countries were formerly two separate, countries under a federal system of government, a federal structure that granted, two equal, status, equal status to both, entities, and they were considered to be sovereign, according to the basis, according to the two-state federation or the federal structure that they agreed upon. This agreement was reached following a UN Resolution 1608 of April 21st, 1961, when the United Nations asked the two countries or the two peoples that they should decide what kind of union they wanted among themselves. They referred to that as joining, because the English-speaking part of Cameroon was formerly part of northern Nigeria, but the people of the northwest and southwest region, as of now, voted overwhelmingly following the plebiscite of 11th of February 1961 that they would rather leave Nigeria, northern part of Nigeria, and join the East Cameroon, that is this French-speaking part of Cameroon, because of the pre-colonial history, which actually meant that we were people of the same cultural heritage per se. And so the kind of joining that they agreed upon was, enshrined into a federal structure, a federal constitution that meant that the English-speaking people they had a separate government, and the French people, had a separate government, even though the French-speaking Cameroon was, in the majority. As you all know, colonization, had, its merits and demerits. And, the union was not a bed of roses. It was very difficult to manage that kind of federal structure of two, unequal people. And so somewhere along the line, it continued to pose a challenge both to the Cameroonian government, the two governments, and the two peoples, and perhaps even to the United Nations. And so behind closed doors, there were apparently intense, political negotiation in order, to undermine the two, federal structure. So that took place, following a plebiscite that was conducted by the Cameroon government in 1972, which meant that the two federal structure was dismantled, and so Cameroon became a unitary state. So it was no longer a federal structure. So the English-speaking people and the French-speaking people were no longer separate. They were no longer as separate entities with two separate governments. They now agreed to form a unity state known as, and that eventually turned into the United Republic of Cameroon. By implication, the two federal structure was dismantled. So the dismantling did not come easy, as there were a group of people who were very disgruntled. They felt very frustrated that that would lead to future, problems of marginalization, or because of the majority of the French, they would be marginalized. There would be a lot of other problems like that of some kind of political domination, which would go contrary to the universal principles of human rights and human dignity, with respect to governance, respect to the management of the country, and all that has to do with equal representation in government and in governance. This tension has been brewing for a long time, and of course, there have been very occasional moments, very eventful in the history of Cameroon since October 1st, 1961, when the English-speaking part of Cameroon had independence. Events that continue to point to the fact that the English-speaking part of Cameroon wanted, to safeguard their own unique cultural identity on the basis of their, colonial relationship with Great Britain or the United Kingdom. There have been moments when the English-speaking people demanded a separate Anglophone GCE board, that is a board that will oversee the correction of the General Certificate of Education Board at the ordinary level and advanced level. There have been moments in history when the English-speaking part of Cameroon demanded a separate Anglophone or a separate university that would be beneficially and would speak to the uniqueness and the unique cultural and educational identity of the British Cameroon. There have been moments when the English-speaking Cameroon in the history of Cameroon also wanted to have a political platform in order for the voices to be heard. They felt that they were not equally represented in the political process in the Cameroon. And those moments been very eventful, but there's one unique characteristic for every event that I have witnessed as a young man growing up: the fact that they were not violent. They were mostly peaceful. There were some, occasions of violence involved, which is understandable, as we all know what happens in primitive societies, or when people are still, living, in the primitive, ages. My point here is to say that, the history of colonization, is very challenging, and each time that we look back to talk about colonization, is like we're taking a step backwards and not forward. With respect to moving, our societies forward, with respect to embracing, the new wind of change, embracing, the new geopolitical platform, like globalization, global international relations, global affairs, and international trade, free trade, international relations, and all that has come as a result of the fact that the world has become more and more a global community. However, in 2016, some of these grievances continued to emerge as lawyers and teachers felt that they were being marginalized, and so they decided that they would protest peacefully. It turned out to be a violent protest as members of the Cameroon military began to crack down on the population that massively came out to protest in solidarity with lawyers and teachers, that had created what you call a consortium, which was a coalition that they brought together members of the civil society, activists, to represent the teachers and lawyers in the trade union. The government did not take it lightly, and with the situation escalating and getting out of control, there was, however, an outcry for dialogue, and the government listened to that outcry, and so convene a meeting for dialogue. But members of the civil society, they argued that the government had bad faith. They didn't believe in the dialogue that was proposed by the government, and so the dialogue crumbled because there was no mediator, there was no third party. Both parties, they went in for the dialogue without any person to mediate. So I don't know how that was even going to work, because even from the get-go, I knew that it would pose a problem, because in any situation regarding a conflict between members of the trade union and government, there's always somebody that has some experts that can mediate, who can actually be able to pursue the matter in a very constructive and healthy manner, so that common sense can prevail. And then the population decided again that they would continue to protest, and as a result of that, of course, in any situation, people, a group of people who had been piling up grievances for a long time, they took advantage of that. And the group that took advantage of the misunderstanding between the lawyers and the teachers was known as the Ambazunya, which are the group that had been, they had nursed grievances since 1972, when the two-state federation was dismantled. So they exploited, the environment of misunderstanding, the failure of dialogue, and then they took matters into their hands, and they hijacked the platform of the consortium, for nonviolence and civil disobedience, and formed a government on social media, and created a country known as the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. Many of them who had fled from the country and became citizens of Europe and North America, they decided to use their financial power in order to corrupt, young people in Cameroon. And they began to sponsor weapons. The United Nations Secretary General and the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, they tried to reach out to them, appeal for dialogue, calling on both the government and leaders of the Ambazonia terrorist organization abroad that they should, stop any further acts of violence, and that they should take seriously into consideration the fact that the civilians were also in the mix. But this fell on deaf ears, as the leaders of the terrorist Ambazonia organization abroad, they argued that the only way that they can get the international community to involve in Cameroon, to intervene, is to provoke, situations of bloodshed, situations that will result into killings and the spills of blood. That is the only way. That is the only language that the international community they understand, especially the United Nations. So they intentionally indulge into acts of violence, of terrorizing and killing, and framing up unarmed civilians to be killed, so that they will use that to make an argument to the United Nations that their call for separation from this French-speaking part of Cameroon was justified. As you all know, has been 3 years, and this, of course, did not come to pass. So that's why we're where we are right now. And so we, Cameroon patriots, we love our country. We think that there's been problems, and we know that from the history that I've just counted to you, we've been able to solve some of these problems. So we're coming back to you and appealing to you, all citizens of the world. Whether in Europe, if you know the European Parliament, the German government, the French, the British, the Canadian government. If you are in North America and you live in the United States, and members of the Congress, you're citizens of any of these countries, and you listen to me, please, there's a severe humanitarian crisis in Cameroon now. And there's just a lot of pain and suffering. There's displacement as a result of this armed conflict that has been imposed on the region by the Ambazonia terrorists that are living in the United States, Canada, and in Europe, and they've been claiming that they are fighting, for independence, for their human rights, but many of them are not citizens of Cameroon. These are all a bunch of people who have lost their mind, and they've been misleading, youths in the country. They have drugged them. They have initiated them into a secret society in Nigeria known as Odieshe. Some of them are on cocaine and banga, and my heart goes out to some of these young people, because I know that they've been lied to because of their voting ambition, to create a separate government in the country, which is impossible within the government. I understand that due process is fundamental, in the pursuit of justice, of freedom, liberty, especially in the 21st century. where with the advent of diplomacy, with the advent, of the United Nations, with the advent of international relations, international cooperation, global affairs, world affairs, and globalization, international trade, as you all know, the world has become more and more like a family. So the pursuit of weapons, the pursuit of violence is no longer, palatable. It's no longer, a luxury. So we denounce violence in any form, and we agree with those who believe that we can solve our problem by pursuing non-violent methods. So we're here again calling on you. My name is Jonathan Awasum. I'm the executive president of Compassion Peace Initiative Coalition. Please, if you want to reach out to me, my number is 201-878-5829, and I'm here to address this severe humanitarian crisis. And I'm asking and appealing, to humanity that please, we are speaking out because women and children are suffering. These Ambazonia terrorist leaders, there are about 21 of them in the United States, contributing money and bribing and corrupting young people and imposing lockdown in our countries and using weapons and threatening people that they should not go back to school. But what the population is doing today, in order to denounce and in order to send a very strong message to them that they do not agree with them, there is a massive exodus, from this region. People are deserting and running into the arms of the French-speaking people. There's very people that are accusing them for marginalizing the two regions. And this is a paradox. This is really a travesty for what they're fighting for, because there's no perfect union. There's no perfect union. As you know, many countries, as far back as the 17th century, they all came about as a result of something going on with people scrambling, to colonize and scrambling for natural resources. So at the time that, nations came together and began to reason, there was not really any clear fixes in things, in the way that things were done. They just had to put things together just to bring in some peace and harmony and some order. So if we have to spend our time here trying to look at whether we are supposed to, whether black people and white people are supposed to live together in the United States, or whether Muslims are supposed to live together with the French people, just like in Britain and other countries, in Germany, in Canada. I mean, we know that the United Kingdom is made of so many countries, and Scotland has been clamoring, wanting to separate, but they pursue non-violent to a referendum. So there are a lot of problems, especially in the continent of Africa. So we have had our own fair share of these challenges, but we've also very thoughtfully, very reasonably, very constructively been very considerate in the way that we pursue them. So we do not agree with foreigners, strangers, people who deserted the country and they leave and gone overseas, pursue, their dreams or abroad and have their children, send their children to school, engage in different economic activities overseas, and then turn around contributing money and misleading young people in our country. We have been solving this problem. Each time that there's a challenge, our leaders, as I know, grown as young people, they came together. We handled this issue maturely and responsibly. So we condemn these Ambazonia terrorists overseas, and we are asking for the European Parliament, the Canadian Parliament, the French House of Commons. We're asking for the German, Parliament. We are asking for the United States Congress that they should enforce anti-terrorism laws and to hold these Ambazonia terrorists who are living in these societies, and they are responsible for propagating one of the most, severe humanitarian crisis and war crimes that have resulted into rape, kidnapping, torture of women and children. I've seen women and young people lying in a pool of blood. It is unacceptable. Again, this is Jonathan Awasum, and Compassion Peace Initiative Coalition is advocating for peace. We want peace, we want dialogue, we want understanding, but all this cannot take place in an atmosphere of violence, in an atmosphere of lies, of manipulation, and false propaganda that is being perpetuated by Ambazonia terrorists overseas. We have, given their names to the United States authorities, and we expect them, the Congress of the United States of America, to revisit the issue. It is important, for us to look at these things in the light of the universal principles of human dignity, to respect the sovereignty of nation, to respect the rights of the people of civil society, to respect the rights of patriots, to understand that those of us who stand for nonviolence, we have a right to exist, and that we cannot sit, and allow people who do not have any modus or who do not have any locus standi in our country to dictate on us, impose a government overseas, and misleading young people to be killed while their families are in great pain and in great suffering. It's about time for all this to stop. And it is the responsibility of our people, of our citizens of the world, all of you in your countries, to turn around and ask every elected member in your district, in your city, to tell you what is happening in Cameroon, because they know. But we need you to join us in this our campaign to bring peace in our country. Once more, thank you for your attention. Again, this is Jonathan Awasum, the Executive President of Compassion Peace Initiative Coalition. My number is 201-878-5829. Please, you can reach out to me at any time. And thank you. We are on Facebook and we are also on WhatsApp, and you will see us anywhere if you will want to. Please, thank you again. God bless you all.